Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this session of Ask the Expert. My name is Miles McKernan. I'm a principal ServiceNow consultant and project manager at a company called GFT. GFT is a ServiceNow partner, and we work mainly with financial services organizations. So the topic of today is a topic that I like a lot, and it's around sourcing and vendor management, which is part of IT asset management. So let's get started with the presentation that I've prepared. So bear with me a second whilst I share my screen. Okay, so hopefully you can now see my screen. We do have some slight technical difficulties, and I can't show you the presentation in slide mode, but I'm hoping you can see my screen successfully. Again, the topic for today is around sourcing and vendor management, which are disciplines contained within IT asset management. So for the agenda, I would like to start out by introducing the challenges that sourcing and vendor management, or SVM, face today in many organizations. Then we will see the benefits of leveraging a platform such as ServiceNow in order to drive sourcing and vendor management activities. Another important aspect are implementation considerations. So when you do start a program or a project related to sourcing and vendor management, things that you should definitely consider. We will then see how software asset management relates to these two disciplines within the ServiceNow platform. I will show you some examples of artifacts and screenshots that we've created in the past. And finally, we will go to a questions and answers session in which you can ask me any questions relevant to the presentation that we'll see today. So, having said that, let's start. So I wanted to start with some definitions so that we're all on the same page. So what is vendor management? So vendor management is essentially a discipline that enables organizations to control costs, drive service excellence, and mitigate risks to gain increased values from our vendors throughout the whole deal lifecycle. Sourcing, on the other hand, is the procurement process that continuously improves and reevaluates the purchasing activities of company. Then we also have contract management, which is the management of contracts made with customers, vendors, partners, or employees. Also important that the concept of a license, which refers to terms and conditions of use of a product or service. And finally, entitlements, which represents the right of use for an individual or organization. So having introduced these terms, let's move on to one of the main challenges that sourcing and vendor management faces. So I would say the main challenge is the actual complexity of the IT asset management lifecycle itself. So as you can see on this slide, asset management, like many people tend to believe, is actually a huge discipline containing many different elements. So here we can see different streams involving governance, fulfillment, auditing, active asset management, disposal, and then IT financial management. And within these streams, we have different components. You can see there are multiple components. The ones I want to focus on today are contract management and vendor management, which are part of the fulfillment stream. We'll touch a bit on inventory management, which is related to auditing, and then how do we actively manage our assets. So we will also look at model management and usage management. But you can see when you look at the whole picture of IT asset management, you get to see how many different elements can be involved, and this is one of the main challenges. Okay, so now I'm on the next slide. So one of the issues with SVM today is that in many institutions it's simply considered as a back office function, and therefore it lacks proper system support to be able to carry out its purpose, which results in different challenges. So some of these challenges, just to list some examples, is the inability to manage consultant onboarding and renewal in a consistent fashion. So those of you who work for IT service providers, it's very typical that when you're working with a client, they say that a particular employee will be onboarded in 3 weeks, but in the end, that process, for some reason or another, ends up being 6 weeks, which has a negative impact not only on the service providers but also on the clients, because it pushes back important project dates and deadlines. Another challenge is how contract management is normally dealt with today. So it's in many occasions it's seen as this standalone function with no real orchestration with all the different groups that are part of the vendor management process, which include vendor management themselves, possibly the controller to approve the budget. Then you have risk management that assesses whether a particular what the risk level is regarding a particular product, business owners, relationship managers, etc. Other issues is that the vendor management phase is the inability to track, monitor, and report on the performance of the different vendors with which they're engaging with, and therefore there's a lack of metrics and consolidated reporting that could provide real value to this function. Again, vendor spend is another issue. So it's many organizations, it's very hard to get an accurate picture of how much we've spent with a particular vendor or in a particular, or broken down by cost center or department, business area, etc. Another very common issue is that the data related to service management and contract is scattered all over the place, so there's no single version of truth. So we may have contracts in SharePoint, then we have vendors in our SAP General Ledger system, and we may even have the physical contract in a document repository. All of these vendors with different names, so it's very hard to get a full picture and a consolidated view of all of our data. And all of this translates at the end of the day in the inability for a company to be able to take calculated and objective decisions on new and existing vendors, which at the end of the day is going to have a negative financial impact on our business. So having introduced the challenges, let's have a look at some of the benefits of supporting the SVM functions using a platform like ServiceNow. So just some of the benefits that we can list is the ability to procure the best vendors in regards to price, quality, and relationship, and all this can be monitored successfully through leveraging the ServiceNow applications. The ability to negotiate and manage multiple vendor contracts effectively and ensure these contracts are signed in time. For those organizations who rely heavily on managed services, the possibility to link service level agreements to contracts in order to manage penalties and performance failures. And then another important aspect is the automatic linkage of all of these different components, such as the vendor, the purchase request, contract, product, on asset, on a single system of record, which is what ServiceNow provides. And all of this allows us to turn data into valuable management information that will allow us to take informed decisions that will improve our business. Okay, the next slide shows the different applications, or some of the applications that ServiceNow has which we can use in order to improve the vendor management processes. As you're probably familiar, ServiceNow has three different, or categorizes applications in three different areas. So we have management applications, one of which is the vendor performance management, which will allow us to manage the relationship of vendors and create assessments. But all of these different applications in ServiceNow are related to each other. So the vendor performance management is related to the IT cost application, which allows us to plan, analyze, and control cost, which is another one of the management applications. Then we have the other layer, which are operational applications, which are more related to service management, but allow us to link how many incidents are related to a particular vendor. Also, any request that an employee wants to make. So if we want to onboard a new vendor or request a new product or service, all of that can be channeled through the service catalog. And then we have the relationship with that third layer, which are infrastructure applications, in which we can link different assets to vendors. And all of this is on a single platform, which is, I would say, the great advantage of using ServiceNow for these functions. So where should everything start? This is an important question. So if I'm an employee and I want to start working with a new vendor, or I want to renew a software license which is close to expiration, or I want to I already have a vendor but I want to start using a new product or service from him, or I need to extend or terminate a consultant, where would I go? Well, the good thing is that all of these questions should be answered by leveraging the service catalog, which should be the starting point for all related IT and non-IT requests. Okay, so by creating different requests, we can manage the whole workflow or process behind all of these questions. So if I want to create a new vendor, or terminate a consultant, or request a new consultant, I can create a category within the service catalog that will have all of these items. The great thing about ServiceNow, again, is that it is seamlessly going to maintain the data integrity between all of the different components. So if I request a new vendor, at the end of the process, what ServiceNow is going to be doing is creating a vendor record. Likewise, if I request a new product or service, the underlying deliverable is a contract record. And if that contract is for a software license, I will also be creating a product or a model related to that contract. And finally, I will also have assets, which are the number of rights I have for that particular product. And all of this relationship is automatically maintained in ServiceNow. So, for example, if I go to a vendor record, I can already see the list of all the related contracts, the list of all the related products, and also the list of related assets. Similarly, if I go to the contract record, I can see which vendor that contract is related to, the list of assets the contract covers, and also the list of product models. So all of this is maintained now transparently by the ServiceNow platform. Okay, so we've talked a bit about the benefits of leveraging ServiceNow in order to carry out these functions within asset management. Now we're going to look at general considerations that you should keep in mind when you actually go to implement these. So data accuracy is a very important one. As we've just seen, ServiceNow maintains data integrity through the relationship of all the different components. But it's very but the most important thing is to ensure that the data that we do load into ServiceNow is accurate. Okay, if we don't load accurate data into ServiceNow, everything else will be pointless. Okay, so ServiceNow should act or can act as the central repository for all vendor data, and therefore become our golden source or single version of truth. Other systems that require access or reference to vendor data, can then integrate with ServiceNow for such means. An important point to have in mind is that the reference data should only be shared with other systems when necessary. So what this means, for example, if we are using SAP as our accounts payable system, SAP should only contain references to vendors with which we're actually going to have a financial transaction. So if we've only signed an NDA with that vendor, but we're not going to proceed with them, there's no point of informing our financial system of that vendor. Even more importantly is using an iterative approach to asset management. As we saw on the initial slide, there are so many components which makes it impossible to tackle all at once. So my recommendation is to start off with workshops in which we clearly define the business requirements, and based on the prioritization of those business requirements, or whether we want to, we're looking for some quick wins, we can then start defining different projects and iterations which will finally take us to our long-term goal. Okay, but it's very important to start with short iterations. Okay, another consideration is process. So ServiceNow provides the different applications which essentially allow us to store and relate the different components of asset management between them, but it doesn't really provide the actual workflow or process. Okay, so the process is very, I would say, it depends. It's dependent and differs, from organization to organization. So defining the process and the orchestration of different tasks and approvals and notifications is another important part of the process related to sourcing and vendor management. Integration, again, so these systems these elements, they don't live alone. So we need to think of which other systems may require access to vendor information or contract information or asset information, before we actually start the project. Other considerations to make regarding vendor performance. So I'm assuming most of the people on the call today are related to IT, but vendor performance doesn't only relate to IT, as there are many other types of vendors. For example, we can have vendors that are responsible for our marketing campaigns. We can have vendors that create events for us, or are responsible for catering. And there's no reason why these other types of vendors shouldn't be managed and assessed using a standard, a standard and structured methodology and process. Roles and responsibilities is another important aspect. This is very important also at the time of implementing the security model in ServiceNow through access controls. So we should definitely make sure that we define all of these roles and responsibilities up front. Reporting, again, taking advantage of not only the out-of-the-box reports that come with ServiceNow for all of the different elements, but we can also create custom reports and attach these to relevant dashboards. And the final consideration is concerning scope. Again, we may be we may be global organizations, but we start off by rolling this out locally. But it's important to now to take into account and assess what the impact will be of rolling out these processes globally. So just a quick example, you may want to try to keep a more accurate view of your data by restricting the federal tax ID to nine characters. So whenever somebody submits a request for a new vendor, you ensure that the federal ID now conforms to the US to the US standard. However, if you have an office in Australia, well, in Australia the tax IDs have 12 characters. So these are things that you should also consider when you're building out the different artifacts. And then again, business area differences. So in many occasions, 90% of the process can be done in one way. But what I've seen, and based on experience, is that there are always exceptions that need to be identified and taken into account when building out the different workflows and processes around sourcing, vendor, and asset management. The next slide just shows an example of how to define the different roles. So, for example, we can have roles for the contract manager, for people who need to, for different groups who need to review a contract, which could be credit risk, information security, business continuity management. Then we have the vendor management roles who are responsible for negotiating the project up front. Then we can have the vendor relationship managers, which are responsible for the ongoing relationship, accounts payable, people who are responsible for managing the models or the assets, the controller who could be responsible for budget. So there are multiple different groups and roles involved in sourcing and vendor and asset management, and we need to be very clear on what each of these roles can actually do and see within the system. Okay, so next we're just going to have a look at the out-of-the-box features that come with the vendor, contract, and asset management applications. So vendor performance management is an application that comes with ServiceNow. What we can do with this, with little customization, is, it already provides us with a vendor repository, which allows us to create new vendors, modify or view existing data, and then we can also create custom vendor attributes on top of those that are already standard and come with the out of the box application. We can use this for vendor relationship management, so we can assign vendor managers who will be able to view all of the vendors by going to the My Vendors module. They can also complete different assessments that can be created in ServiceNow by leveraging the assessment application, and also surveys which could be sent out periodically. Vendor scorecards is another functionality that comes with ServiceNow, and the scorecards show us a summary including a summary of the vendor's performance, which can include how many incidents have been related to them, any discounts, breaches, outages, etc. We can create decision matrices in which we can compare vendors in multiple categories. Then we can define different metrics for evaluation. So, for example, we could have, within the user satisfaction category, we can determine different metrics to see how quickly a vendor responds to user queries, or whether this vendor exhibits a positive attitude, and also whether the vendor proactively offers product innovation. And also, by leveraging what the ServiceNow functionality, out-of-the-box functionality has to offer, we can track vendor performance through SLAs, and we can also, based on SLA breaches, we can automatically track vendor credits that are created whenever an organization has breached a service contract. So this is vendor performance. Contract management is another application that comes out of the box, and it comes with features that allow you to manage the contract lifecycle management. Again, this will always be customized to the exact requirements of your organization. So contracts have different contract types. Examples of contract types: software licenses, bundles, maintenance, insurance, non-disclosure agreements, etc. So contracts come with standard attributes such as identifiers, start and end dates, active status. But of course, we can add on. We can create our custom attributes according to our needs. We have contract comes with workflow and approval functionality. Also, there's a contract notification feature that comes with out of the box, so that key users can be notified in a period before a contract is about to expire. We can associate rate cards and expense lines to contracts. And finally, we can also see the contract history, in which we can see relationships between contracts. So we may have a master services agreement, and under that we can see all of the related agreements and addendums on one single record. And then we have a ServiceNow also comes with asset management applications. In respect to asset management is, as we saw, is a very huge discipline, and there are assets of different nature. So there are different, within ServiceNow, there are different applications to manage assets, whether they're software assets, hardware assets, consumables, such as a mouse or keyboard. So all of these assets are managed in a different way, and therefore ServiceNow provides different applications. Discovery is another feature of ServiceNow. So ServiceNow can automatically discover assets by scanning a particular IP range on our network. Stock management can also be done in ServiceNow, so receiving stocks, allocating them, or transferring stocks from one location to another can all be managed in ServiceNow. Software licensing, again, the creation of software models, software licenses that we have for a particular model. Software compliance, so we can run counters to ensure that we're not using more rights than we have allocated. And in the context of hardware asset management, we can also manage depreciations. So these are just three of the applications that come that are part of the ServiceNow out of the box. There are many more related to asset. So financial IT management is another one, but today I would like to focus on these. Other implementation considerations is reporting. So again, one of the biggest values of creating these systems on ServiceNow is the ability to create timely reports, and that will allow us to make informed decisions. So we have out-of-the-box reports for all of the different components, but then we can create our own. So examples of reports that you can use in respect to vendor. So you can see the average performance score by vendor. You can see the vendor spend grouped by a particular period or department, cost center, business area. You can see your top vendor. You can see a list or report of your top vendors based on assessment results. The same similar with contract. You can see the expenditure by contract type of vendor. You can see the total, total contracts for a particular vendor. Group vendors by state, or by cost per unit, by lifetime cost. You can also do trend reports to see how the cost related to external consultants has changed over time. And then again, related to assets, we can see the asset cost by vendor, the total number of assets by vendor, the overall asset value by vendor. And again, if we define our process right, all of this data, we can access all of this data and these meaningful reports real time. Another area are incidents. Again, this goes back to managed services. So whenever we're an organization that relies heavily on outsourcing, we can manage the different incidents related to different vendors and tie these back to the contract in order to manage penalties and credits. So in essence, reporting is a very important aspect. So the first thing I recommend is to understand which reports are already available with ServiceNow out of the box. But the next step is also to define those reports that are valuable to your organization. And I believe this is the final implementation consideration. So whenever we're defining the workflows, it's very important to ensure that we involve all the correct stakeholders in those workshops. As we mentioned before, multiple parties are involved, including sourcing, including vendor management, contract management, controller. If we're in financial services and we want to start working with a new vendor, we probably need to do an anti-money laundering check on that vendor. So it's very important that we make sure that we interview all of these different groups correctly to understand the exact nature of their activities, so we can finally incorporate that into our workflow and then leverage the ServiceNow workflow tool to be able to orchestrate and automate these activities. Okay, the next point in the agenda was how does software asset management relate to all of this, and in particular sourcing and vendor management and contracts. Okay, so what you can see now is the software asset application. Again, as I mentioned before, there's an asset application which is more general, as it includes information of different types of assets, including hardware and consumables. But then if we want to be more specific, ServiceNow provides the software asset management application. This comes with, again, useful reports that we can take advantage of, and different tables to manage the software models and software licenses. So what you're seeing now, and if you haven't seen, if you're wondering about the nice design, this is actually a screenshot from Fuji, which we upgraded to at GFT this week. So what you're seeing now is a screenshot of the attributes that come out of the box for a software license asset. You can already see that it's related to a model category, and you have different form sections. One is the contract, so it should already be related to a contract. Then you can see two different types, two different form sections, which are the entitlements. So a software license can either be entitled to be used by an end user, or it could be associated to a device. So it's important to understand how do we keep our processes consistent so that all of this information is up to date. So one thing is, how do we create model categories? Again, so this should be part of our contract workflow. So whenever a contract is of a type software license, or is related to software licenses, that means that we're acquiring a new software model. So we should incorporate the action of creating a new model whenever that new contract is being defined. Okay, so it's at that stage in which we're automatically linking the contract with the software license. Not only with the with the software model. Not only that, but we should also be creating the software licenses based on the contract and entering the number of rights that contract stipulates we can use in relation to this software. Okay, so another one of the other features that software asset management in ServiceNow comes with is discovery. Okay, so ServiceNow has a great discovery tool which allows us to scan our network in order to assess what software is installed. But it's important to state that asset management is a lot broader than a discovery tool. So many firms believe that they're doing asset management because they have a discovery tool and it's scanning the network and it's creating all of these different CIs and assets within the database. But as we've seen, asset management is a lot broader than that. So it's about tracking the physical, financial, and contractual information about the asset as it changes throughout the entire life cycle. So when we talk about reconciliation, so for me, the way in which we can achieve asset accuracy is ensuring that we have a consistent process. Okay, so this process would normally start through a vendor. So in order to request a product or service, we need a vendor. Based on that vendor, we can create a contract. And once we have the contract, if this contract is for software licenses, we can then create the software model. Okay, so a software model could be ServiceNow, for example. And at the same time we're creating the model, we can enter into the system how many software license rights we have. Okay, so then if I'm a user and I want to request an installation of a new software, so that should always be done as a request through the service catalog. So I go to the service catalog, I request I want a new license for Microsoft Project, and ServiceNow should automatically or programmatically, I would say, be able to update the information related to that software license and to the user which it's been associated to. So if I just jump back a slide, and you can see the tabs user entitlements and device entitlements. So you would think that the ideal scenario is that this information gets updated automatically whenever a user requests the installation of a new software through the service catalog. And finally, in order to reconcile or to audit the accuracy of our IT management process, what we can do then is use the ServiceNow discovery tool. So the ServiceNow discovery tool at this stage is going to be able to, if we run it, we're going to be able to see what actually has been installed versus what we believe we installed through our process. So I think that's the real magic of using discovery. But before using discovery, it's very important to have a consistent approach to asset management. And finally, I'm just going to show you some screenshots of some of the artifacts that could make up this whole sourcing and vendor management process. So what we're looking at now is an example of the contract record, which lives within the ServiceNow contract management application. But again, the actual request to create this contract is submitted via the service catalog. So there could be a type of users who are just submitters who never need to access the actual contract, but they do have the information to be able to submit this on behalf of maybe their manager within an organization. So here we can see an example of a contract record that has been configured. So we can see different form sections in which we're capturing information regarding information security or business continuity, credit risk, budget, etc. The next example is an actual service catalog form to submit a request for a new vendor. Okay, so we have information about the vendor, information also about different contacts, and then information that can be relevant to our organization. To ensure that we only have one, we're not creating multiple vendors who are the same. We can add simple checks within these forms. So, for example, we can ensure that the federal tax ID numbers are unique. So, if we work for a very large organization and they and they want to start working with a new vendor and they're not aware that that vendor is already part of our environment, we could use a federal tax ID to indicate that that vendor already exists. And this is back to the contract record, but I did want to, as we pointed out, as I was mentioning, how you can create the relationship between contract and software models and software licenses. Well, in this case, whenever the contract is related to software license, the related list that we can see here at the bottom of software models and software licenses are displayed. So you can automatically, or the model manager is responsible for creating the software models from the information contained within the contract. So this is one way of obtaining that data integrity across all the different elements. And then this is a final thought. Again, it goes back to the complexity, not so much the complexity, but the magnitude of all the different elements that can be comprised within asset management. And this is a different view of seeing all of these different activities. So, for example, when we want to start working with a vendor, we have to carry out due diligence activities, so vendor research, define business needs, document and send out RFPs, evaluations. Okay, so once the due diligence has been completed and we've selected a vendor, then you need to finalize the contract, you need to do planning, then you go into the implementation phase, in which you need to manage the relationship, confront issues, deal with remediations, escalations, and then we have maintenance, renewal, and termination activities. So you can see how how huge asset management can be, but all of these activities can be can be supported in a much easier way by leveraging a system like ServiceNow. So that's the end of the presentation. So I'm hoping you've managed to learn something today. So there is a final slide. So if you go to the community and you follow this thread, or you search for this session, you will be able to post different questions, which I can either try to answer now, or otherwise I will get back to you as soon as possible with an answer. If you're not already a member of the community, please, I do recommend you to register. I mean, it's a great place in which the ServiceNow community can share our experiences and knowledge, and also troubleshoot. Okay, so let me go back to the Hangout to see if there are any questions. Okay, so I can see. So one question says it's related to the technical implementation of the service catalog, and they're asking whether whether you recommend using standard request items or record producers. And that's a valid question. The way I've typically done this in the past is if we know that a certain request is going to end up creating a particular record. So, for example, a request for a new vendor will always create a new vendor record, or a request for a new consultant will always create a contract record. So in these cases, it makes more sense to use a record producer, which again, for those of you who are not too familiar with ServiceNow, allows you to automatically create a record from a service catalog request. However, there may be requests that don't always create a particular record. So, for example, if you're submitting a request for a software, for a software maintenance renewal, you may not need that. It may not be associated to a new contract. It may only need a purchase order, or it may need both. So in this case, it makes sense to implement those requests as request items and use different scripts within that request item workflow to create the different components, be it a purchase order or be it a contract. Okay, another question is around vendor spend. So how can you track vendor spend in ServiceNow? So that, again, this is a good question. So typically, most organizations have this information in their main accounting system. Okay, so if you want to be able to report on that information in ServiceNow, you need to, as a first iteration, you need to extract that information from your accounting system into ServiceNow, and which will then allow you to build the different reports. Although going forward, as a future enhancement, I would say the best way to do that is to leverage the ServiceNow purchase order application. So all purchase orders are initiated within ServiceNow. So once you're doing that, you can relate the purchase order automatically to the contract and to the vendor, with the associated cost. So you already have all of this cost information in ServiceNow without having to go to another system. Then what you can do, if you're still using another system as your general ledger and accounting system, is to send that purchase order or purchase request information downstream to other systems. Okay, let me see. So I can't see any more questions at this time, so I'm hoping that everybody has been able to learn something today. And again, if you have more questions, you can post them in the community, and I will try to I'll definitely answer them as soon as possible. Thank you very much for joining this session, and hope to be able to present to all of you again in the future. Thank you.